One video back, we discussed the social value philosophy of wealth, which asserts that the total amount of wealth you make for yourself in your life is a portion of the total value you create for others. Said another way, this means that to create disproportionate wealth for yourself, you must create disproportionate value for society. If this were strictly true in a hypothetical society, wouldn't you love to live in such a society? Where everyone's personal wealth was only an indicator of the value that they created for others in their lifetime. Let us look at the underlying axioms or tenets that must be true in a society for this philosophy to hold. First, this philosophy can hold only if what you earn belongs to you. Else, you may create immense value for others, but a feudal lord or government may confiscate your portion of whatever value you created for others. What is this axiom called? It is called private property. When a feudal lord or government cannot confiscate your property. Second, no one should be able to force you to buy or sell anything. Because if you are being forced at gunpoint to buy something, then the seller may end up creating disproportionate value for themselves without creating any value for you. This was the case with the East India Company, which made itself and Britain incredibly wealthy while plundering India and thoroughly destroying its economy over almost 200 years between 1757 and 1947. What is this axiom called? It is called voluntary exchange, when all exchange of goods and services is voluntary and no one is being coerced at gunpoint. Third, if there are any side effects of your enterprise, you must pay for them to make the society whole. Because if you are not taking accountability for your side effects, you may create wealth for yourself while leaving other people worse off, those who must bear the burden of the side effects that you created. For example, for hundreds of years, tobacco companies sold products that, as a side effect, created a massive healthcare burden on society. And for decades, tobacco companies used every trick possible to evade responsibility for their side effects. This made tobacco companies wealthy, but this wealth came at the cost of others. Today, oil and gas companies are in a similar situation. It is clear that carbon dioxide is causing climate change, which will adversely impact millions of people on the planet. So oil and gas companies should pay for cleaning up the environment through a carbon tax. Because unless they do, the wealth they create for themselves comes at the cost of future generations and is not a portion of the value they create for others. What is this axiom called? It is called having regulated externalities, so that any externalities that your business has are regulated, priced, and taxed by the government. Fourth, you should not be able to stop others from competing with you through corruption. You must compete and win fair and square on the quality of your product or service, and not because you have friends in government who will put restrictions on others from competing against you. For example, this was the state of the Indian economy from 1951 to 1991. You needed an explicit license from the government to start any business, and these licenses were only given to those who had friends in the government. This kept incumbent businesses safe from competition, which also meant that these businesses had little incentive to innovate or improve their products and services. This economic system was called the license Raj. It created artificial business monopolies, and these monopolists became wealthy without creating equivalent value for society. What is this axiom called? It is called not having corruption or not being able to bribe politicians and bureaucrats. Or, if you would like a euphemism, not having regulatory capture. If all these four axioms hold, then the social value philosophy holds, and you cannot create wealth for yourself without creating value for others. Now, think from the perspective of a corrupt big business. What does a corrupt big business want? Does it want a society with all these four tenets enforced? Or does it want a society where it can break one or more of these tenets for its own benefit? And what does an underdog want? Somebody who's a nobody, a first-time entrepreneur, without any benefactors or friends in government. Of course, corrupt businesses will always try to break a tenet or two. They will try to stifle competition by bribing bureaucrats and politicians. They will want to evade accountability for their side effects. And they may even want to force you to buy their goods at gunpoint. But what does an underdog entrepreneur want, who doesn't have any friends in government? All that an underdog entrepreneur can wish for is that these four tenets are enforced, so that they get a fair playing field against incumbent businesses, so that no one can bribe bureaucrats and politicians and tilt the playing field. So now that you have seen the four tenets of the social value philosophy, can you think of another name for this philosophy? What is this philosophy better known as? This idea that to create disproportionate wealth for yourself, you must create disproportionate value for society. Is there a better name for it? At this point, my MBA students usually respond with phrases like fair competition, ease of doing business, and free market. Actually, these four tenets are the tenets of capitalism. If this is at all surprising to you, it may be because whoever tried to explain capitalism to you did not truly understand capitalism and gave you a definition that included dull phrases like means of production, capital goods, and market mechanisms. At least that's what happened to me when I was in school. In reality, the underlying philosophy of capitalism is the social value philosophy. To create disproportionate wealth for yourself, you must create disproportionate value for society. You may think that this does not apply to corrupt mega corporations in the real world, because mega corporations break these tenets all the time. And I will get to that in a minute. But notice that this absolutely applies to underdog entrepreneurs who start something without having benefactors and friends in government. They are too insignificant to break a tenet of capitalism, too insignificant to have unregulated externalities, and too small to benefit from corruption. So the only way for an underdog entrepreneur to create wealth for herself is to create value for others. Also note that the opposite of this statement is not true. It is quite possible to create enormous value for others, but to never capture a portion of it, either by donating it all to others or by losing it all to competition. So let us answer our question from the previous video. Do all businesses have positive social impact? The answer is yes, as long as the four tenets of capitalism are not being violated, which is almost always the case for startups. So, if you're with me so far and you have started to understand the social value philosophy of wealth, then you will also appreciate that in this philosophy, there is no difference between entrepreneurship and social service. If social impact is impact on everyone, and if an entrepreneur is not breaking a tenet of capitalism, then the entrepreneur can create wealth for themselves only by creating value for others. So creating value for others is at the very heart of entrepreneurship. This line of reasoning usually troubles at least a few students in my MBA class. Those who don't like the corruption and the lobbying that is sometimes on display from mega corporations. Yes, mega corporations can be very corrupt, and a lot of lobbying is done by them to restrict fair competition from emerging. But corruption is not a problem that is unique to capitalism. Corruption is a problem of all human systems. Monarchy, dictatorship, socialism, communism, all systems suffer from corruption. In fact, if you speak to someone who has lived through one of these systems, you may discover that these systems can be even more corrupt than capitalism. No human system is free from corruption. If you don't like mega corporations, you should actually be a strong proponent of the idea of capitalism, because capitalism promotes free competition. So the underdogs are free to innovate and compete against the mega corporations to keep them in check. This is also the essence of the term free markets. If you have heard the term free markets, you should substitute it with free competition. The core belief should not be that markets take care of everything, which they don't, but rather that letting markets be free allows free competition, which keeps mega corporations in check. Finally, some students are also troubled by the intent of an entrepreneur in capitalism. I get comments like, some people don't care about creating value for others, they start startups only to make money. Doesn't intent matter? Can an entrepreneur with bad or selfish intent create value for others? Let me reverse this question and ask you, can a politician or a bureaucrat with good intent destroy the lives of others? This is what India learned in its tryst with socialism for 40 years from 1951 to 1991. Good intent does not translate into good outcomes for society. India's socialist politicians had great intent to create equality and to uplift the lives of the poor. But their socialist policies drove millions of India's most talented and most ambitious young people to leave India for the capitalist West. We lost generations of innovators and millions of ideas, and we never achieved equality in our society either. Good intent is also fickle. Politicians who begin their careers with good intent can turn cynical and corrupt in a few years of real-world experience. Good intent is also easy to fabricate. I'm sure you can think of examples of any number of sociopaths in political life who have been caught doing awful things in private while espousing their good intent in public. And this is the real problem with statist systems like socialism, communism, monarchy, and dictatorship. They all need benevolent rulers and bureaucrats with good intent. And if this intent changes, such systems can cause a lot of misery for everyone, especially the poorest and the most vulnerable. Whenever someone proposes ideas about socialism, communism, and their variants to you, just ask them what would happen if their dear leader was replaced by a sociopath a few years later. Would the system still achieve the proposed goals of equality, prosperity, etc. for everyone? Therefore, what a society actually needs to create lasting prosperity is a system that does not depend on anyone's intent. Capitalism is such a system. At the heart of capitalism is an incentive system, the profit motive, that incentivizes everyone to create as much value for others as possible, because maximizing value created for others also maximizes profit, assuming that the four tenets of capitalism are not being broken. This was the epiphany of Adam Smith, that intent does not matter in capitalism. With this, let's end our discussion of the wealth dimension and take up the impact dimension in the next video. Hey there, I'm KJ Saxena, founder of Relentless VC. The video you just watched is part of the Venture Capital and Entrepreneurship specialization, which is available absolutely for free on relentless.ventures. Go check it out. If you're a tech startup founder and want to raise money from us, you should apply on our website. Lastly, if you like this video, do subscribe and share it with your friends.